Hello, I'm Mansur Sadulaev. I'm a political refugee in one of the European Union countries, a public figure and human rights activist. I am also the chairman of the Chechen Human Rights Association Vayfond, which is registered in Sweden and operates in accordance with the laws of the Kingdom of Sweden. More details on the activities of our organization can be found on our website. Usually, we have to talk about violations of human rights by the Russian totalitarian regime, but unfortunately, today I am compelled to talk about the recent spread of racial and religious discrimination against Chechen refugees and other violations of human rights in Germany. To begin with, several years ago, upon arrival in Europe, the famous Chechen blogger Mansur Abdurrahmanov was detained in Poland due to his persecution by the Putin regime, at whose request he was added to the Interpol list. However, soon Mansur was removed from this list thanks to the work of lawyers who proved that his data was added there illegally. Mansur criticizes the Russian regime and its officials like Ramzan Kadyrov by talking about large-scale human rights violations in the Chechen Republic. So Mansur learns from the words of the Polish authorities that the German police added his data to the Schengen information system, claiming that he poses a danger to the Schengen countries without giving any explanation. Further, he receives confirmation to these words already through his lawyer in Poland, whereupon his lawyer files a request to the Schengen information system asking to explain why his client is added to this list, and receives a response that he is actually not included in this list. Strange, isn't it? It turns out that it is either the Polish officials who lie or the Schengen information system, or have the Schengen information system themselves already managed to remove it. Moreover, there is another story. Last summer, I was detained at the airport in Sweden, where border guards informed me that my data was added to the Schengen information system at the initiative of the German police. Although I had only been passing through Germany and had never committed any illegal actions either in Germany or in the whole Schengen territory. A few hours later, I learned from the same border guards that I am on the Interpol list at the request of the Russian authorities, and they accuse me of terrorist activities without giving any evidence. The charges were so ridiculous that the Swedish prosecutor did not even refer the matter to the court and decided to release me immediately. The fact that I was on the Interpol list was not a surprise to me, since our organization is engaged in the cases of the people whom Russia is pursuing by illegally using the Interpol search system. At that time, we've already had more than 10 people whose removal from the list we had achieved, having proved Russian abuse of its rights in Interpol with regards to these cases. By the way, just recently I have received a notification from Interpol that I had also been removed from its list. However, I was very surprised by the actions of the German police, which declared me dangerous for the Schengen countries. Why would they do that? After all, for 6 years of living in Austria, the Austrian police did not add me to any lists and did not consider me dangerous to anyone. So, on what grounds did the German police deprive me of the right to choose the place of residence and to move freely, which is guaranteed to me by Article 26 of the Refugee Convention? To continue, let's go back to Germany. Mansur Abdurrahmanov's brother Muhammad is an asylum seeker in Germany. More than once the police came to him with a search, trying to find something illegal, but found nothing. As a result, they found fault with the publication of one of the famous news agency, which he shared on Facebook from their official page. The publication contained a photograph with the symbols of ISIS. He simply posted their article on his page with a comment alluding to Russia's connection with ISIS. In effect, he was accused of distributing prohibited symbols. Recently, police broke into the homes of some Chechen refugees in Germany, blowing up doors and thereby endangering women and young children. Searches were carried out in the apartments and the detainees were immediately released. They didn't find anything during the search. At the time of this operation, there were journalists who filmed everything. The news spread in the media about the Chechen Islamists who allegedly wanted to attack the synagogue in Berlin, and the police managed to prevent the attack. Why the nationality of the suspects is highlighted so much? Is Chechnya an independent state? Why it is not mentioned anywhere that Russian Islamists or Russian terrorists were detained? After all, no one in the West recognized Chechnya as an independent state. So, why is nationality being emphasized as if the documents of Chechen refugees indicated that they are from Chechnya and not from the Russian Federation? It is not a discrimination based on nationality. After all, such news in the media imposes the opinion on the public that almost all Chechens are terrorists. The third article of the Convention relating to the status of refugee states, the contracting states shall apply the provisions of this convention to refugees without discrimination as to race, religion, or country of origin. So, why is it in relation to the Chechens that the police and the media focus so much on their origin? Moreover, the most interesting fact is that this show with a big headline about Chechen Islamists takes place at the moment when Miss Angela Merkel is in Moscow at a meeting with Russian dictator Putin. It has to be underlined that Putin is the one who for the past 20 years has been actively convincing the whole world that all Chechens are terrorists. Well, except for those who became his voluntary slaves like Ramzan Kadyrov. In connection with this operation, the police state that it is better to double-check than to check not thoroughly enough. Yes, we fully agree with and support this. Likewise, we also support the need to fight criminals and terrorists, including figures such as Anders Breivik, Brenton Tarrant, or Stefan Ballet. And not only those people who are professing Islam by distinguishing them on religious and racial grounds from the total mass of criminals. If there is a need to double-check someone, then why do this with the involvement of the media and voicing their religion and nationality? Why blow up the doors if the detainee says that there is nobody in the apartment except his wife and young children? If he asks not to break the door and not to scare the children, but to simply introduce themselves as the police and ask his wife to open the door, and she will do that. All these and other factors indicate that the purpose of the police was not a checkup, but the loud declaration about the alleged Chechen Islamists in Germany. Consequently, the natural question arises: why are the German police in every possible way trying to complicate the life of the above-mentioned political refugees who are actively pursued by Russia? What is the reason for this? We see only two possible answers. First, the German authorities agreed on some kind of cooperation with the Russian authorities regarding these and other refugees like them. Therefore, this means that Chechen refugees who are really persecuted by the Russian regime on political, religious, and racial grounds should avoid seeking asylum in this country. The second option is the following. Perhaps the German police received an anonymous report on these refugees from people who announced themselves to be some kind of Chechen government in exile. In this case, we would advise the police not to become a tool with which these imposters get rid of political opponents or simply people they don't like. In any case, we urge the German authorities to comply with all norms of international law. Remember that history puts everything on the record, and any discrimination against people remains as a dark stain on the reputation of every state.